What's up guys, my name's Ella and this is my first ever YouTube video. So I thought that a fun video, or like a good way for you guys to get to know me would be, for like my first video, would be if I did all the books that I read so far in 2022 so that you are all caught up, you know what I've read this year, and we can keep going with like monthly wrap-ups and things like that. So for background, I read like 60 books last year, like in 2021, and I read about 70 books in 2020. In 2022, though, as of now, I've only read 17 books, so I'm way behind what I have been because I was in school. I was finally back, like, at school in person. I'm a rising senior in college. I'll be a senior this year. So I am finally back at school in person, so I have a lot going on in terms of I'm no longer stuck in my room, but I still really enjoy reading. So I read 7 of my 17 books in May after school let out. So the summer I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, and I'm hoping to keep up doing a lot of reading in the fall semester now that I got some mental health stuff figured out, and I'm going to make it a priority. So this is all 17 of the books that I read so far this year. I have some of them, I have like 10 of them I think here physically, and then I read some of them on my iPad. I read a lot on my iPad. So those I'll just pop up a picture probably like right here-ish into the video when I'm editing. Anyway, let's get straight into it because I already talked too much. The first book that I read this year I have since read 2 more times, and that's All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I stumbled over that a little bit. That book, I read it, started it January 1st, finished it January 1st. It was the best way to start my new year. It's about this girl named Aurora who she was born and raised in this town in Colorado by her single mom, and then her mom was a hiker in this Colorado town. Then one day her mom goes missing while she's on a hike, and she has to move to Florida with her like aunt and uncle. And after it fast forwards to when she's an adult, and as an adult going through a really difficult breakup, she moves back to the town that she's from and where they never found her mother, and she moves into this garage apartment that was put on like this like Airbnb type website by this teenager. And when the teenager's dad finds out, he is not happy, and his name's Tobias Rhodes, and he is now Aurora's landlord. And it's not enemies to lovers, it's Grumpy Sunshine. And so at the beginning, like, he seems to really have a personal issue with her, but really it's other things. So I wouldn't say it's enemies to lovers, but I have heard it described that way. It's mostly Grumpy Sunshine, single dad, and I just absolutely adored that book. 5 stars. The second book that I read in 2022 I liked a lot less, and that is Death in Her Hands by Tessa Moshe, I think is how that's pronounced. This is the same author who wrote A Year of Rest and Relaxation. This book was like 200 pages, 200 some pages of nothing. It was recommended to me by the girl who worked at the Barnes & Noble that I go to, and I don't know that she was totally understanding what I was looking for. I just wanted like good literary fiction books that didn't weren't romance focused. She recommended this to me. It's about this old woman who owns a lot of property and is walking her dog in the woods one day like she does every day, and sees a note in the woods that says, "Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here's her dead body, but there's no dead body." And so the woman that found the note thinks that she needs to solve this mystery of this supposedly dead body. And it was really weird. Nothing really happened. It was really boring. I gave it 2 stars. Didn't love. The next book I read was The Atlas 6 by Olivier Blake. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think on Goodreads I gave it 4 stars, but it is a 4.5 star book. This book was really, really good. It's a fantasy book about if the Library of Alexandria had never burned down. So there's this society called the Alexandrian Society, that are caretakers of all the knowledge in the world, and in order to be a member of this society, you have to, like 6 people are chosen every 10 years or something like that, and 5 of those people will be caretakers of the Alexandria Library, or the Library of Alexandria. So it's about this particular year and these 6 characters. I really liked these 6 characters, but they are all so morally gray and so flawed, and there's a lot of like romance and angst and drama. Not a lot of romance, but there is romance and angst and drama, and magic, and it's really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait for the rest of the series to see what happens when Olivier Blake doesn't have to spend so much of the book world building. I'm really excited to just see what happens when she can just tell the story. The next book that I read this year is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I feel like everybody and their mother has read this book in the past couple of months. I read it back in February before it had gotten a lot of the hype that it has right now, and I'm really thankful for that, because I think if I had heard or I had started reading it after it had gotten all of the hype that it currently has, I would have rated it lower than I did. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I think if I had gone into it with it really hyped up in my brain, it would have been a 3 out of 5 stars. It felt like Lucy Score was trying to do what Mariana Zapata did with All Roads Lead Here, but didn't quite, it's not giving what it's supposed to be giving. It was about, it's with this woman named Naomi who on her wedding night, her sister calls her, her twin sister Tina, who has always gotten the both of them into trouble, calls her for the first time in a really long time and says, hey, I need either help or money, probably both. Can you come to this place? And gives her a place. And so Naomi doesn't really want to get married anyway, so she leaves her wedding, goes to find her sister, and finds that her sister's not there, but she has left a 12-year-old named Waylay, and the person who shows her around town and kind of makes it known that her sister is hated in this town. His name is Knox, and he hooks her up with like a place to stay and stuff like that. So it's Grumpy Sunshine, it's enemies to lovers again, like just kind of. He hates Tina. He hates Naomi's twin sister, but he doesn't hate Naomi. I don't know. A book that does live up to the hype is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This book was 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorite romances of all time. It's about this girl, her name is Macy, and her mom dies when she's young and leaves a list of things for her dad to do to like raise Macy the way that she would have been raised if her mom was there. And one of the things is to buy a vacation or like a weekend home. And so her dad does this. He finds this lake house, and when they go to see the lake house for the first time, Macy finds a boy her age reading in her closet, and she says like, what are you doing here? We just bought this house. And he said, my name's Elliot. I really love reading. Nobody's lived here for a really long time, and I really love reading in this closet. And Macy said, well, I love reading too. So if you ever want to come and read together, we could do that. And that's what they do for the next decade of their lives. And then something happens. And the book is told from 2 timelines, before the something happens and after the something happens, and it's been 11 years and they haven't spoken. And so they reunite, they run into each other randomly one day, they reunite, and they fall back in love. And I've never seen 2 characters who are more the definition of soulmates. They're perfect, and I love them. I love this book. 5 out of 5 stars. I know that everybody has been talking about this book and everybody's hyping this book up, and I can assure you it lives up to the hype. The next book that I read in 2022 is Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book in the Bellinger sisters either duology or series. I think it's just these 2 books. It is about Hannah and Fox. Hannah is the sister of Piper, who was the main character in It Happened One Summer, and Fox is the best friend of Brendan, who is the hero in It Happened One Summer. It Happened One Summer was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved that book. Tessa Bailey has a couple 4- and 5-star reads for me. I love her writing. I love her characters. She writes steam really well. That's not something that it doesn't make or break the story for me. It doesn't really matter. I can do with or without it. But she does it really well. This book didn't really do it for me. I wasn't super impressed. It's friends to lovers, which that has to be done really well for me to enjoy it. I didn't buy Fox's whole main conflict. Fox's whole thing was that he had been like attractive his whole life, just like his dad had, and he saw how his dad like treated women, and he didn't want to treat women that way. But my thing is, like, your dad didn't treat women that way because of how he looked. Your dad treated women that way because of that was how he wanted to treat women, and that was how he thought women should be treated. You obviously know that there's something wrong and that you don't treat women that way. So why would that be what's holding you back? It didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't really buy his sob story and that was a major like player in this book, so I didn't enjoy it. I gave this book 3 out of 5, which stinks because I really liked Hannah as a character. The next book I read is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This book, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I either gave it a 4, let me check. Yeah, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, which seems like a bit of a harsh rating, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's closer to a 5. This guy is a criminal psychologist, and there is a woman that he's always been fascinated with. Her name is Alicia, and one day she killed her husband and then never spoke again. Didn't speak a single word, not throughout the entire trial. She didn't speak a word after he died. Like, she hasn't spoken since, and it's been like 10 years. And he's really curious as to what happened. Nobody knows, like, why she killed her husband or, you know, anything like that. And so this book, I'm usually pretty good at guessing twist endings, and I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 because I did guess it, kind of. I will say, like, that was probably why I gave it a 4 out of 5, but this book was still so good. I recommend everybody read it if you are looking for just like a quick, fast-paced read. I read this during my semester, and like I said, like I struggled really like getting into books during my semester, and this book had no problem. This book was so good. I originally read it on my iPad, and then this is my mom's copy because I insisted that she read it. So this book is so good. 4 out of 5. But if you don't easily guess endings, or you're not usually right about the endings that you guess in movies and books and stuff, you'll really enjoy this and you'll be really thrown off guard. The next book I read is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This book is about a statistician named Jess, and she is freelance, so she is able to work from anywhere. And she works in this coffee shop every day with her friend who is a romance writer. And every day they see this guy come in. He's super grumpy. They call him Americano because every day he gets an Americano. And he turns out he is running this startup for an app or like a dating service that can match you based on your DNA with like your soulmate, your supposed soulmate. There's certain genes that they determine how suited two people are for each other. And so Jess begrudgingly, with like her friend, forced her to take this like test and like get her blood drawn and determine the DNA. And she ends up being a match for Americano. And so it's Grumpy Sunshine. I really love Grumpy Sunshine if it's done well. Sometimes it's a little bit too manic pixie dream girl. So I definitely do really enjoy these books, and this one was no exception. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It was the epitome of Christina Lauren. The next book I read was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I am in the process, I have an 8-year-old little brother, and we are in the process of reading the entire Harry Potter series, first book to last book, Sorcerer's Stone to Deathly Hallows. So I read that book. I don't normally rate the Harry Potter books that we read, but I do count them because it is a book that I read, and it adds towards my goal. So I did read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, but I didn't rate it. The next book that I read was Twice Shy by Sarah Hogel. This is the same person who wrote You Deserve Each Other, a book that I own but haven't read and should probably read because I own a physical copy of it. But I read this book on my iPad. This book I hated. This is the definition, like this is what I mean when I say like Grumpy Sunshine, manic pixie dream girl, and just grumpy for no reason guy. This book is about a girl who inherits her great aunt's house after she passes away, but she's not the only one who has inherited it as well. There's the like groundskeeper inherited the other half, and they have to decide what to do with it, and there's a lot of fighting and stuff. And there's also this whole aspect where she has like an imaginary world that she's made up. And she was also catfished with a picture of him, but it was someone else. It wasn't him catfishing. I don't totally understand, but this book, I was looking for like a fun contemporary romance, and this just wasn't it for me. I gave it like a 2 stars. But the next book that I found did satisfy all of the requirements that I was looking for a fun, like sweet contemporary romance, and that is Weather Girl by Rachel and Solomon, which I gave 5 stars. This book is about Ari Abrams. She has loved the weather her entire life, and she's always looked up to this weather person named Torrance Hale. And Torrance Hale, Ari ends up working for her. Torrance Hale and her ex-husband work at this station together, and they hate each other. And Ari, I don't know how you say it, it makes her life miserable, and it also makes Russell's life miserable because he works in sports with Torrance's ex-husband. So these two are in the same position, and they make this pact that they're going to try to get Torrance and her ex-husband back together, and in the process, Russ and Ari fall in love. It is depressed heroine, which I really liked. I liked that representation. I thought it was done really well. and plus size hero, which I feel like we don't get very much and isn't very, like, there isn't a lot of representation for that. So again, I really liked that too. So I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I feel like not enough people read it and talk about it. I really liked it, and I strongly recommend to anyone who is interested. Okay, I'm nervous for this next one. The next book that I read was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is my favorite. This was my most anticipated book of the year, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And one of those stars is really just because it's Emily Henry. This book should have been a 3 out of 5. Beach Read is my favorite book of all time. That book speaks to me on so many different levels, and this book does too, to a certain extent. What I really loved Nora as a character. What I felt was lacking was everybody around her. Nora Stevens, okay, so what this book is about, if you haven't heard, if you've been living under a rock this month, this book is about Nora, who is a book editor, or publisher, or agent. She's a literary agent, that's what she is. Nora is a literary agent, and she runs into this guy. She has like a bad encounter with this one guy. Like, it's supposed to be enemies to lovers, but really it's just like they've had one bad encounter. But Nora had a bad encounter with this guy named Charlie, who is a book editor, and she is like, she considers herself the girl in romance movies, like the other, like the girlfriend that the main character already has, that he like breaks up with because she's too cold and like perfect, I guess, and he ends up falling for like the sweet small town girl. So that's how she considers herself. And I love the concept of writing a romance book about the woman that's like that. The woman, she talks a lot about her Peloton and like iced coffee and that kind of thing. But I just felt like Nora's sister really irritated me. I'm the oldest sister. I know what sister relationships, I have 2 younger sisters and I have 3 younger brothers. And I know what sister relationships look like. Obviously I don't know what everybody's sister relationship looks like, but this one just felt very immature even though they were in their 30s. And she like infantilizes her younger sister, even though her younger sister is married and pregnant with her 3rd child. So clearly like she has her life together and doesn't need parented anymore because you lost your mom 13 years ago. Like, I don't know, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Charlie was very lacking. Sometimes I would feel like he was almost to where I wanted him to be, and then he just came up short. So this book, I love Emily Henry, and the writing was so good, and I loved Nora, and I want better for Nora. I wanted better for her because this book just didn't really do it for me, which stinks because it was my most anticipated read of the year. The next book that I read is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This book, I love Kennedy Ryan. I love her. She's such a great author. This book is way more emotional than the cover would lead you to think. The cover and the description on the back is like, ooh, fun little basketball romance. No. This book, trigger warning, look up all the trigger warnings, literally like all the trigger warnings, especially for domestic violence and sexual assault. This book is about, I don't really know what to tell. This guy, August, meets a girl in a bar one night, and they really hit it off. August is a professional NBA player. These two really hit it off, and then he finds out that the girl's boyfriend is also a professional basketball player, and they're like enemies. They hate each other. They've been competing their entire lives, and so for half the book she's with this other guy, and there's a lot of domestic violence, like themes of domestic violence, that I was kind of expecting going in. I read some reviews, and I think Steph Borer talked about how this book was a lot deeper than you would think based on the cover. So I was expecting some themes of like I was expecting some darker themes, but if these are things that are triggering to you, I would definitely make sure either avoid this book completely or read the warnings. I think she puts them at the beginning, and I think they're also on Goodreads, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this book was very dark, but I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and it was an emotional roller coaster, but it was one, how do I put this? This is an important story, and while it's a frustrating and an emotional story, I think that it's one that a lot of women should read, because it talks, like, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned, and a lot of, like, themes of don't judge because you never know what someone's going through, and also themes of, like, be careful because you never know who someone is. So I think that if these aren't themes that are triggering to you, this is definitely a book that you should pick up. I will be continuing with the rest of the series, but I don't think the rest of the series is as emotional. I think it's just this first book. So the next one that I read is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. this book was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. This book was very similar. It gave very similar vibes to Weather Girl. It's about this girl and this, okay, so it's about this girl. She works for like Chip and Joanna Gaines. They're based off of like that HGTV like family and enterprise. But except these two, this Chip and Joanna Gaines, that's not their name, but they hate each other. And this girl has been their assistant and worked for them for 10 years, and they just got another new assistant. And then, so the 4 of them, like the girl, the new assistant, and then the Chip and Joanna Gaines characters have to go on this trip together, and it's a disaster. They're trying to keep it out of the limelight that the couple doesn't get along. And I think that, like, the fact that I read this book, like, 2 weeks ago and I don't remember anything about it says a lot about this book. It was just boring. It wasn't what I expect from Christina Lauren. I expect that little bit of, like, heart-clenching, like, I don't know, I expect it to be better. I love Christina Lauren books most of the time, but this one, like I said, Christina Lauren books are hit or miss for me. This one was not definitely a miss. This one was very middle of the road. It wasn't what I wanted, so I gave it 3 stars. Okay, the next book is A Risk Gone Forever by Ennis Perkins. I read this book because I was looking for Grumpy Sunshine books, and I had heard some people talk about this book, and it definitely does fit the Grumpy Sunshine trope, but it's about this guy. His name is Matthias. His mom has MS and is wheelchair bound, and he's looking for a caregiver for her. And this girl, Adelaide, needs a job. She loses her job and she finds that there are interviews happening at the moment that she's looking. Like, right now, she needs to go to these interviews to be a caregiver because she's good at being a caregiver. She has experience with that. And they meet. She is dressed for her other job that she's got fired from, so she's not dressed that nice. And he instantly judges her and is very protective of his mom. And I loved the story and I loved the characters, but I gave this book 3 stars because the writing was so bad. And I hate to say that because that makes me feel really, like, guilty to say that, because it just, like, someone worked really hard on this book. N.S. Perkins worked really hard on this book. I just felt that this book, this is their debut, but sorry if you can hear the cars in the background. Anyway, this book, the writing was just very, like bad Wattpad writing. It was very much in your face, like, here's how you should be feeling, here's what you should know. These sentences, like, don't really make sense. I really didn't like the writing and I couldn't get past it, which stinks because I really enjoyed the story and I really loved the characters, and I think that it had a lot of potential. Then I read Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood, and this book is a novella, and it kills me that this book is a novella because I loved it so much. So Ali Hazelwood wrote The Love Hypothesis, and she is coming out with a series of, I think the second one comes out like this week, of STEMinist novellas, and it's just all novellas based on, with like the main character, the hero, is in science and is in STEM, and I think that's so cool. And Ali Hazelwood is such a brilliant writer. She speaks to me. And this book is about a girl, again, it's like Twice Shy. This book is about a girl who inherits a house from one of her mentors, and she comes to this house that she has inherited, finds out she only inherited half and has to share it with this very grumpy lawyer. And the girl, she's ginger, the girl works for the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and he works for an oil company, or like a lawyer that protects oil companies. So very, like, opposites attract, but I loved this book. I read it in one sitting. It was only 150 pages because it is a novella, but I wanted this to be a full-length book so badly. Like, it just wasn't enough. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because it wasn't enough. Like, I needed more, but I understand that it's a novella. And I just can't wait for Ali Hazelwood's next full-length book in September because this was just phenomenal, and it made me, like, realize that The Love Hypothesis wasn't just like a one-off. She's a really good writer and all of her books are going to be amazing, and I can't wait. Then, the most recent book that I have read is Ever After Always by Chloe Lisey. My camera just died and I'm so close to finishing recording this video that I'm just gonna finish talking about my last book and wrap it up on my phone, so I'm really sorry that the quality has changed. But anyway, this book has a character, hero with anxiety, and a, like, curvy mid-size heroine, and that's, like, talked about and it's like there's talked about how, like, she talks a little bit about how she's like worried her husband's not attracted to her anymore and stuff like that. I really loved this book. Like I said, I don't really typically reach for married in trouble romances. This one did it really, really well. And I want to read the rest of the books in the series. They're all these books about this family of 7. There's 2 girls and 5 boys. And this is, like I said, the 3rd book in the series, but I haven't read the first 2, and I think I'm going to go back and read them because this book was about like a family vacation. They went on this like big family vacation to celebrate their parents' 25th anniversary or something. And I really loved the family dynamic. I really loved the way that the 2 main characters learned to communicate. I think that the character development in this book was phenomenal. Really loved it. Strongly recommend. Again, one that I don't hear people talk about a whole bunch. So that is every book that I've read so far this year. I think that this was a really good way for you guys to get to know what I enjoy in books, what I tend to read and lean towards. I do go through phases, as you could probably see. Like, I read some literary fiction, or I would read like a thriller, but I do mostly read romances. So I will be posting videos every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, and I have the next like month's worth of videos ready. So I hope that you are as excited as I am, because I definitely am. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you so choose, and I will see you when I see you.